Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, helping driven, experienced professionals gain more influence, impact, and income in their careers. And today, speaking of careers, we have Kelah Raymond on the show from Be The Sparc. She's a Forbes Coaches Council member, and she'll be talking about with me today. We'll be discussing, when do you know it's time to exit your organization? So if you're feeling kind of about where you are right now, maybe it might be time to look for something new, and how to spot the signs when you are actually too big for your role, as well as what are those first steps you need to take when you're considering running off to something new, and how to set yourself up for success if you are considering pivoting out of your organization and or your role in general. If you've never seen my smiling face before, my name is Aaron Urban. You can find out more about me right down here at coachyurban.com. Feel free to check out the podcast. Career Coffee Chat Podcast is on all the major channels, Apple, Spotify, Deezer, etc., etc. So when you are joining in, please say hi. Say where you're from, say your name, so I'll know to give you a shout out and a good morning when you're hopping on the show. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, feel free to pop it in the comments. We will pause from time to time during our conversation to make sure that we answer your questions. So, hey, Curtis, nice to see you. Glad you can join us. And if you are coming in from Facebook, because we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, sometimes I cannot see your name on Facebook, so please do put your lovely name in there so I can say hi to you. Hi, Jesse. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining this morning. Hi, Eric. Good to see you. Thanks for joining in from Houston, Texas. So a little bit about Kelah. Kelah is an HR professional, and she has nearly 2 decades of experience collaborating with organizations and leaders to support, align, and further their corporate goals and workforce strategies. Her areas of expertise include HR strategy, talent management, organizational leadership development, performance improvement. Her greatest joy, though, is helping hidden talent emerge from the shadows. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Kelah Raymond. Kelah, nice to have you on the show. So excited to have you with us. We've got Curtis, Jesse, Eric, and Venice was tuned in from Houston. Hi, Venice. Good to see you this morning. And today we'll be talking about how to know, when do you know when it's time to exit your organization? And Kelah, would you like to kick us off with a few thoughts of your own in that area?
Absolutely. So, there are many signals and signs. But I've kind of dwindled my list of all the things that I've seen as I've worked with internal employees, people that have clients that I've coached, and even myself. A lot of these are things that I talk about from a career perspective come from personal stories as well too. And so one of my top ones is complacency, right? You're on autopilot, right? And if you haven't, kind of gained a new skill, sharpened a skill, done something to grow, I would say in the last 2 years, you might want to do a check-in.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So complacency, is just one of those things where you're on autopilot. Like, you're in your role and really you can do it in your sleep, right? You haven't seen anything new in a long time. And you're just kind of, on that hamster wheel, just going, gunning, going, doing, responding, reacting, but not really fulfilled. I always like to say, if you want to be in a role and you want to be in a career that sparks joy, right? It may not do it every day, but at least weekly, a couple times out of the week, there should be a joy sparker somewhere in your day, right?
Right.
So that's one of mine. Of when you're probably getting a little too big for your britches in your role or your career.
Yeah, would you say it's getting a little bit too big, or maybe just not reinvesting in yourself?
So it could be a little bit of both. And I know from a talent management perspective, a lot of things that employees within, companies do is they wait. They're waiting for HR, or they're waiting for their leader, right, to own their path in their career. And spoiler alert, your leader in HR is waiting on you too. So
right, it's all up to you.
Yeah, at this stalemate where everyone's just waiting for someone to say ready, set, go, right? So, people will wait for the organization to invest in them versus just going, you know what, whether they invest in me or not, I'm going to invest in myself, sharpen my skills, and make sure I'm, reignited, if that's the word, or recharged. So I think sometimes it's a little bit of both.
So from your perspective, Kelah, what I would ask you as an HR professional, because I'm sure a lot of people tuning in, like Dewey, hi, good morning, Dewey, and Rosanna, nice to see you from Cyprus. These people probably want to hear, in your career, from the HR and leadership perspective, because as we know, times are tough. Economy is not good right now. And first thing to get cut is, guess what? Training and development. That is the first thing that gets the axe. And if you are one of those individuals who feel like, well, yes, my organization should invest in me, and if you wait, if you're that person versus someone who's more proactive and says, you know what, I'm going to go out, I'm going to get some, or certifications, or maybe just additional learning or ongoing development for myself, from the lens of the person in HR who sees this going on, these two different personalities, so the wait and seers, and then the ones who are like, okay, I'm growth minded. Which ones, in your opinion, actually get tapped for leadership roles first?
The ones that will take the initiative and go and do. They do. Because a big part of leadership is seeing a need and filling the need. Right? And not always necessarily waiting for the next step, right? Because especially as you climb higher and higher in levels of leadership, exactly. It's not so much, it's really not at all, as you go higher and higher, about the technical skill set, right? It's all about those soft skills, right? The ability to be, a visionary, to see opportunities, to strategize, and to lead other people, right? And leadership is about influencing others to do things that they really don't want to do.
Or at least make it okay for them to do it, and they don't mind so much. Or at least know what the focus
and creating a space and an environment, to get them to move and to act. So it's always going to be hands down, bar none. And I even have a personal story myself. There was a time in my career where I was, and it was so funny because as I reflect, I'm like, was it postpartum? I had a baby about 4 years ago, and I was like, was it postpartum? Like, really, what was it? What was happening in my own career and my own self? But I had become complacent. I probably could use the phrase jaded. I was a little jaded. I was waiting. I was that person. And I said, you know what? I need to learn. I'm always at my best when I'm learning something and then being able to apply that. And I actually kind of put in a business case for me to get a particular certification. And it was not a hard no, but it wasn't a quick and dirty, here's the money, we'll expense it out. Go ahead and do it. And so I said, you know what? Whether you guys do it or not, I'm going to pay for it myself. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to spend the money. And it's so funny. I pursued this certification. I got it. And it was probably literally within the next 30 days that they say, hey, we have some money for you. And so what I did, I went and get another certification.
Well, or get reimbursed. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is, some people who are loath to pursue career coaching, they might actually be able to, or any sort of personal development, career coaching, certifications, even if they don't cover all of it, they may cover part of it. So don't let that stop you. Go ahead and make the ask, but always ask for the big thing first, because it's a lot easier to give a concession later. Just a top tip there. Hey, Art, how are you joining in this morning? So if you all have any questions as we move along for Kelah about, when do you know it's time to exit your organization? What's those next steps? What should we be on the lookout for? Please do pop it in the comments, whether you're joining in from LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. And again, if you're joining in from Facebook, I can't see who you are, so please say your name so I can say hi. So Kelah, yeah, so you mentioned complacency and just kind of taking what's going on for granted, feeling a little jaded. What's another red flag that, hey, might be time for me to either upskill, shift roles, or move out of my organization altogether?
Yes. So when I look at complacency, I would consider complacency as a topical, right? A symptom. But this next one, I feel like it's more of a root, right? The root cause to, what it's time to shift, or knowing that it's time to shift. And that is all about value and mission misalignment, right? And that's a reflection of where you are as an individual in your career, but then also a reflection of the organization. How close are you guys aligned? Have you evolved and not necessarily outgrown their mission, but maybe the values are no longer in sync, right? And they converge well, right? So I feel like that one's more like a root cause, right? Like digging deep, doing a little soul searching, right? I like to encourage my clients to make value-based decisions, right? And that's kind of where that comes from. Are you really in tune with your values and what's important? Because, hey, there's a very, very good chance from the time you signed your offer to today that your values probably have shifted. Have you had a kid? Have you gotten a divorce? Are you taking care of elderly parents? There's a number of things that could shift where you are in your career. Which could also mean either, it's time to shift to a new job, a new role, or you're kind of just outgrowing where you are now.
Right, absolutely. Or you're being forced to outgrow it because that industry, and if you're from Houston, Texas, you probably know what I'm talking about, is not doing so well. So it's important for your career longevity to pivot into something that has a more of a future proof, if you will. And also, what I hear from time to time from those people who reach out to me for coaching and those people who I coach is what the company does and how they go about it does not align with their business ethics, right? And that's a harder pill to swallow when that is not alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to, in your opinion, what would you do in that situation when you have that moment where you're like, oh, my values, whatever they are not in alignment with this organization? What do you do next?
I think when you hit that critical, point, that's definitely not like a leader issue or a role issue. It's the organization. It's you and the organization, right? And I think that is a tall tale sign that it's time for you to move on, right? So what do you do next? My first thing would be really get centered on your own personal values, right? Before you move on to another organization, because you can find yourself, in company CDE, right, from AB, where it's different name but pretty much same company, just a different look, right? And in order to mitigate that or avoid that, my charge to any person would be really get centered on the things that you value. Like for me personally, I love innovation. I love challenging work, right? If I'm not able to create and innovate and, like I like to say, be HR avant-garde, I get bored, right? And it's just not a good fit for me.
Right,
so
right.
Kind of knowing, really knowing your values and what you need, right? Is it, job security? Is it innovation? Is it community? Is it relationships? Is it like a family-based environment? Like really knowing what will get you grounded, right? And have your values truly aligned with that of the organization and or I would like to say team, because we know culture is a big thing throughout every organization. And there's organizational culture and there's also team type of culture, right? So as a person being interviewed for a role, you kind of really want to dig into both levels, right? To understand, because every organization has their values, be it 3 to 7 to 10, right? But then what does that look like in execution on that team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some questions, and would you like have maybe to top 1 or 2 questions in the interview someone could ask that doesn't, because people are always afraid. They're like, well, we don't want to put people off during the interview because the person being interviewed naturally feels at a to use neuroscience a little bit, we feel at a lower status, which is not true, but that's what we feel. Okay. And even though that's not necessarily the case, because it is a conversation, but people are loath to say the wrong thing, but they want to know about that culture. What is it that's important to the team, and how do they collaborate? What's their style? So what are maybe top 1 or 2 questions that you would encourage job seekers to ask to make sure they're not hopping into a toxic situation?
Yeah. There are so many questions that one could ask, right? I would encourage, our viewers to really think about their particular values and ask a question that stems from that value, right? Because you can ask things like, okay, well, can you describe the team culture, for me? How does everyone interact and get along? And you may get like a topical response or answer. Because I mean, just like the person being interviewed, the interviewer, not to say too many negative things either, right? But like if my thing is innovation, right? That's something that I value. So I would probably ask a question similar to, can you tell me the most innovative solution that you and the team, have implemented in the last 12 months, right? I'm digging for it, which is just what interviewers do as well. There are certain things, there's competencies and things that the interview is screening the candidate for, and as a candidate, you want to do the same on the flip side. So there's so many questions I can think of, but that's just an example to give, because innovation is something cool, something that I really like, innovation or creativity. So that's how I would frame the question to probe into what I'm looking for, so that the person responding is not so nebulous and I really get what I need. Hopefully that helps.
No, that's really, really helpful. Yeah, because when we're focusing on what matters to us, and I encourage people to rank their priorities, truly rank them, and then go back once you've ranked them and ask yourself, which one of these will flex based on the right role? Because that's coming at it from a different perspective. So you've ranked it. Now, which one of these will actually flex based on the right role? And that gives you another perspective. So you're better armed into what truly matters. So let's just say, having, being able to be autonomous in my work. We'll just say, for example, I want to be autonomous in my work. I don't want to be micromanaged. How can I ask that in a nice way? Because you don't ask your boss, oh, hey, are you a micromanager? Maybe asking questions around what's their preferred communication style, how often do they interact when there's a project, what drives them, what's important to them, and then really listening and watching the body language too of when they give you that response, because the body language will tell you a lot that's not being said. Like, are they just making it up or not? Right?
Yes.
So what is, okay, let's just say you've decided, all right, this role is too big for me. What is the next consideration someone might want to take? Besides, obviously, oh, hey, I need to look for another job.
I would definitely say, I think it is all about researching. It's about looking for a job, but I would take it a level above that, right? Looking for your ideal employer, right? So if you take the time to do the soul searching around, okay, what are my values, right? And let me rank them. Which ones can I flex on? And you really understand that and you know that, then you can know or you can better search out the type of employer that best fits who you are as an individual and what you want to give to that organization or to your industry, maybe as a thought leader. So if you, like me, right, like really, really innovative. Innovation is probably most in IT industry, right? So if you go into, let's say, manufacturing, you probably will be a little bored. You probably will find yourself at this junction again, unless that company, values innovation and they're at the forefront of their industry, right? So really understanding and researching organizations that really fit with you and going after those organizations. That's right, like being a part of their talent network, because when jobs open up, they'll alert you, they will let you know, and it's that much easier, right, to even interview with those organizations because you understand their values, you know stuff about their company history, you're probably following them on LinkedIn or getting Google alerts about their company. So when press releases happen, you're kind of in the know of what's happening of their organization, which is one of the number one things that people should do just in interviewing and being on the market anyway. So that's the thing that I would say. If you really know, okay, it's time for me to move on, I need to look for something else, be centered, know who you are, and then find organizations that align well with that and go after them.
Right. So for those of you tuning in, we've talked a little bit about how when to spot the signs that you might be time to leave your organization, and what are those first things you need to put together. So I would love to hear from you. What would you consider to be your top value, your top driver? And for some people right now, is I just need a job, and that's fair. And then that's totally fair because we need to pay the bills. And I tell people this, right now during a challenging time, a downturn cycle, we don't want to lose sight of these, okay? Everything that we're talking about, we need to make sure we encapsulate this and capture it, and we don't want to lose sight of it. And it's also perfectly fine to just get a job and then continue looking, right? So that's certainly totally understandable, and I encourage that.
Yes.
Because when you have a job, and wouldn't you agree, Kelah, it's a lot easier to find a job that you want. When you're in transition, there's a lot of other pressures and factors that are encouraging you to take a role that may or may not be a fit for those values. So I'd love to hear from those of you tuning in. What is your top value or two? And share with us what that might look like, so we can make sure that during our conversation we're answering any questions around that space, and if you have any other questions as well. So, setting yourself up for success for pivoting in the new role, you just mentioned, doing your research, targeting those companies that align with your mission, vision, values. And what else would you say, maybe around networking? How can you grow your network with that company? And do they actually use those talent management? When you go in and put in your resume, I mean, do they actually use that? Because people, aren't too sure they actually use them.
Yes. Do they actually use them? I think it all depends on the recruiter, right? That's the thing about this job searching, this career thing. It is, you can't get away from the human element, right? I always say, desperation is the thing that all recruiters can hone in on, like, immediately, right? Like, oh, I just need a job. So, and it's never attractive. Like, you just think about it even in the courting, right? Like, if you're married or not married, if someone was a little too desperate, you kind of are like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know about you. But do they really use it? I think some do. I think some don't. Even now, I talk with a lot of other career coaches around, kind of the hidden jobs, which are the ones that happen between person, right? The ones that I get the inside scoop on and say, hey, we're about to have this position that's open. Send me your resume, right? Before it even hits the LinkedIn, Indeed, Career Builder, all of those options. So within networking, I think that clearly we're on LinkedIn from a professional sense. And if you are in any profession, I think that you should be on LinkedIn, and not just on LinkedIn, like looking and lurking, right? I think that you should be engaging, right? If you follow people and they say something that is cool, or you have a question to follow up, like, engage as if we were face to face, or we were in, a workshop. Like, I would say treat it the same. Because LinkedIn has some really sophisticated algorithms, right? That the more you engage, it rewards you. It rewards you for engaging on their platform, for spending time on their platform. And so, because we're talking about careers and job and and networking, the rewards that LinkedIn gives you is that it shows you to more people, and you end up in more searches for recruiters. So especially with this state of COVID, right? And that we're not face to face, we're not going to the traditional networking environments. This is kind of really the space that we people need to play in and embrace a lot more than candidates generally do. And I get it, it's a bit daunting, it's like, because it's almost like the extension of the workplace water cooler.
A little bit. It's kind of like extension of, the before the meeting chat, after the meeting chat, during the break room chat. No, by the way, when you're doing on vacation chat, and it's not Facebook, but it's a little bit of personal is good. And I'll share with you too, for those of you wondering, oh my God, more engagement on LinkedIn. I'm already liking and commenting, a couple times a week. What else do you want me to do? Well, so here's the thing. When you're in this online space, I'm sure Kelah would agree with me, it takes more engagement than you would in person to make that connection, because you're not in person. Now, in person, it might be an immediate, yes, I get you, you get me, we click, and we're best buds. But in the virtual space, all you have is this little square, whatever you're putting out there. So be value driven. Think about what value you can add. Add value to those people who you feel like are someone you want to connect with in the industries you'd like to seek, and foster those relationships, because it takes a little bit of time.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would just piggyback a little bit on the idea of fostering the relationship. I mean, we're on LinkedIn right now, so we probably all have the people who connect with us, and then immediately after connecting with us, what do they want to do? They want to sell us on something. Like, no, that's not fostering a relationship. Don't be that candidate, right? Like, just don't be that person. And even I have this mantra where I'm willing to help any and everyone, right? I'm no longer working full time, but when I was in my full time role, people would send me roles. They send me a DM just saying, "Hey, here's my resume." Well, one, you didn't really read my profile. I'm not a recruiter. I'm happy to get you in front of recruiters, but I'm not the recruiter. So if you'd have paid attention to my profile, you probably should speak to something from my profile and ask, "Do you have anything that's open?" Create dialogue instead of just saying, "Here's my resume, here's a good fit," right? That's like indirect marketing, if we can put it in those types of terms. What you want to do as a candidate is have direct marketing, right? Hey, I was on your company's webpage and I saw this particular role, and I think I have the skill sets, that fit for it. Hey, would you mind sharing some insights about the company culture, or whatever it is you may want from them, right? Whatever your call to action is for them, be it, can we hop on a call? Can we chat a little bit? Can you give me insights about this role? I see you're in that department. Like, whatever you want to know. But do that. They may respond, they may not respond. But don't just cold DM your resume. Okay, I'm off my rant now, Erin.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. You don't necessarily want to just shove resumes down people's throats. As an HR professional, one of the big questions I think people have, one of the mysteries, a lot of job seekers, really don't understand the difference between recruiters and HR. So just at a high level, recruiters are sometimes third-party individuals. They're not necessarily internal. Now, sometimes they are, but typically they're third-party individuals, and they can be what we call the big box recruiters, which are like the major multinational firms, or they can be boutique recruiters, but they are typically a retained job search, and they go out and help companies and HR organizations, particularly who are already strapped and overloaded, don't have enough resources, to help bring in viable candidates. Now, HR professionals, they are in the hiring process, but they don't necessarily always go out and act like a recruiter, right? And then so from your perspective, Kelah, I'm sure people would love to know a couple things. So I'm going to throw a couple questions at you, and you can tackle whichever one you want. So they probably want to know, okay, number one, how can I connect with an HR professional, and what does that look like? And how can I make sure that's a value add connection, and so I can, make that connection with an HR professional, not be tacky or too forward or whatever, or annoying. And then also, how often do HR professionals, even though they have open job rec, even though you may have retained a recruiter, go out and actually look on LinkedIn yourself?
Yeah. So how can you connect with HR professionals? And our recruiters, right? I think if you're really on the job market heavily, here's just a tactic or a strategy. Connect with anybody that has recruiter in their title. Connect with them, because what do recruiters do? They share postings and positions, and then they share postings and positions of other recruiters, and they don't decline anybody. So that's a safe place to just kind of increase your connections. But if someone has more like an HR leader role, not necessarily a recruiter or talent acquisition role in their headline, I would say go for relationship, fostering the idea of fostering the relationship. So if you look at their profile, what part on their profile really connected with you, right? Are you guys in a like organization? Did you go to the same school, right? Do they have a unique skill set that you are looking to acquire or learn more about, right? Like, be inquisitive, because that also says to the person that is reading either the direct message or looking at the invitation to connect, it's kind of helping them to understand why this stranger wants to connect with me, because we all do that. Like, how'd you find me? Where did you come from? Who sent you? Right? So it kind of helps with that. So find something on their profile where there's common interest, and then say that, hey, I see that we have this in common. I wanted to connect. It'd be interesting to learn and grow with you virtually. I think most HR professionals will accept that invitation, and as they post or as you post and they like or love or they comment on something, then like, not in this very stalkery way, but comment, add value, foster the relationship, for lack of better words, right? That's a way of going about fostering the relationship. And then that second question was, remind me of the second question.
Yeah, so the second part of that would be, do HR professionals, even though there's an open job rec and that may not be, even if you may have retained a recruiter, do you go on LinkedIn Recruiter and look for viable candidates? And how often does that actually happen as an HR professional, knowing that you have a lot of other things on your plate, obviously?
I always say, even from recruiters and either HR generalists or HR leaders, right, who may have a rec or may have a client who has a very hard to fill role. I think all of those things factor into whether or not an HR professional who's not solely dedicated to talent acquisition of the recruiting space, whether or not they're going to go search, right? It also has to do with the daily operations. Do they have the opportunities to do that, or their network? So again, we're dealing with humans. So I think, yes, all of the above truly happens, right? I'm connected with a number of HR business partners in various industries, and sporadically they're posting jobs, which I can tell is a part of their client group, right? So they're not necessarily looking for the talent, but they're kind of sharing it out there. So all of the above happens. And so I know I've been seeing this comment a lot on LinkedIn. You're always one connection away from your next opportunity. And that is just the absolute truth. So again, I always feel like with the right spirit and the right heart, just connect with people, right? Reach out. And like for me, like when I made the comment that, if you really looked at my profile, you will see I'm not a recruiter. And so that's probably a way to differentiate. If you're dealing with an HR person who's more like a business partner, an HR leader, higher levels of HR, they will describe the type of work that they do, right? And if it doesn't say recruitment somewhere in that,
or talent management or something, yeah.
Correct. Or talent acquisition, those are the synonyms, then that's a tall tale sign, and they're probably not in the looking for talent space.
That's good information.
That doesn't mean you still don't connect with them, right? Because they may be in some other space for various reasons, right? Other reasons you may want to connect with them. They may be a part of the organization, one of your, let's say, top 5 organizations that you want to work for. So that's why you want to connect with them, right?
Right. You may be interested in that business unit. So Curtis and Tanya both have some great questions here I'd love to share with you. So Curtis says, it's okay to ask an HR professional or a recruiter to speak directly to the hiring manager before being considered for an interview even. So let's just say, for Curtis's example, Curtis sees a great role out there, and he hasn't been contacted yet. He may have applied, he may not. He, in all likelihood, probably did. And, it's in ATS space somewhere. Is it okay to reach out to the hiring manager or the internal HR professional and say, hey, can I be connected to the hiring manager to talk? So what does that look like? And from the HR perspective, there's a lot of rules.
Yes. I would say, again, we're dealing with humans. So Curtis, it's a crapshoot. You got 50-50, right? If you're playing with statistics, because you're dealing with people, right? In one company, that may be taboo. In another company, they may love the fact that you asked that question. Or one hiring manager may be like, that's a little weird. No, they need to go through the process. Me, as a hiring authority, I'd probably be like, yeah, sure, why not, right? So truly, it's a crapshoot. If you've researched a company and you understand their values, or even if you kind of looked at that hiring managers, if you've been able to figure out who the hiring manager is or LinkedIn profile, to kind of get a sense of how they engage on LinkedIn, to see how open they are, I would kind of use data to back my decision whether or not I want to go for the gusto or not. I know that's not a direct response, but again, we're dealing with people, and as we are people, we bring our experiences and our background to the table, and there's going to be different reasons why one recruiter would be like, yeah, absolutely, let me see if they're available, whereas a hiring manager, for reasons of day-to-day bandwidth, a number of different things, may just be like, no, I don't have time for that, and it could be a turnoff. So I would say get as much information as you can, or even maybe it's a way of how you phrase that question, right?
Correct. Like,
That could
how
be another thing too.
time, I would really appreciate it. I know you're very busy. I really, and lead with what excites you about that organization. Because wouldn't you agree, Kelah, that when someone talks the values language of the organization, if you're truly excited to work there and you can articulate that, that means a lot more than you just saying, I'm interested in this position. Can we talk? So, say what you want to say to put forth the energy you need to get that reciprocation. If that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. And be clear on your outcome and what you want, right? If you have talked to the recruiter or haven't talked to the recruiter, but you kind of want, and I would call it an informal or informational interview is what I would label it. And you want to just get to the hiring manager, like have that compelling reason as to why, right? So like maybe it's something like, hey, I understand that the organization is poised here and positioned here, and my background, has this, but I would really like to better understand here to ensure that I am, a good fit, or, I'm kind of speaking off the top of my head at the moment, but you really want to have a good reason for kind of why you want this exception in the process.
Right. Yeah, because there is a process, and as we all know, as job seekers know, that every organization has their own process. So if you, let's just say, an external recruiter, so a third-party recruiter that's been retained by the company, reaches out to you, it's likely that they're not going to want you if you're not already considered a candidate, they're not going to want you to go around them. So just know that's going to happen. But if you see a role out there and you know the HR professional, it doesn't hurt to reach out. It's just all in how you do it. And just be prepared to get the no, because sometimes a lot of organizations, like Halliburton, for example, that is a no-go. Well, you do not speak to the hiring manager directly. You just don't. And they'll be very nice about it, but don't try to circumvent that system, because they don't like that. So Tanya also has a really great question. She says, I've been reaching out to recruiters, those listed as talent acquisition or for special companies, no response. They connected me. However, they're not responsive to my messages. And I'm sure you'll agree, Kelah, that right now there's a lot of messages. Yeah, and there's not a lot of open job recs. So I'm sure you'll probably also agree that when a talent acquisition professional doesn't have an open job rec, they may or may not respond.
That is correct. And, there's more talent out there, right? So again, when it comes to recruiters and talent acquisition, it's like, how hard is it to fill the rec? Like, what's their desperation level, right? And so, unfortunately, ghosting, recruiters ghosting or not getting a response is a very, very normal thing. But my question to Tanya would be, how targeted is she being, right? Like, is it to your ideal company for specific roles? Is there a role or a couple of roles that you fit, right? And be very, very specific, either with your questions or your call to actions, right? I think the more direct you can get in those messages, especially if they're not generic, right? If you can copy and paste that message and send it to any recruiter at any company, that's probably a good reason as to why most of them you're not getting a response, right? But if you can get more targeted and with your call to action or the question or the why you're reaching out or what you could have for them, and that may be a better strategy, like depending on who you're reaching out to, whether or not, maybe you have a good candidate for a position that's open that has nothing to do with your role or what you have. Everyone loves a good gift, right? So if it's been open for a long time and you have a friend who might be a good fit, hey, just say, hey, I'm just reaching out. I have a candidate referral for you. Even though
they love that.
In a couple more weeks, they do. In a couple more weeks or months, You may be following back up in their messages to say, hey, I now see you have something that I'm a fit for. I would love to ask you some questions, or, could you give me a little bit more insight? Just human nature, they're more prone to do it because they remember you, but for a different reason.
Yep. The law of reciprocity.
Hopefully that helps, Tanya.
Yeah, the law of reciprocity is very, very powerful. So unfortunately, yes, it's a challenging downturn market, and even in a good market, recruiters don't always get back to people, and I'm not saying that's right. Particularly the big bucks recruiters. And if you tuned into the show last week, we had a recruiter from a boutique firm, and she shared a little bit about the difference between, smaller recruiting firms versus what we call the big box recruiters, and the experience is a lot different between those two spaces. And we'll have a recruiter on next week as well. Melanie Woods will be joining us from CGL Recruiting to talk about leveraging LinkedIn and expanding your network and what recruiters look for on LinkedIn. But yeah, so it's a couple things. If they don't have an open job rec, it's not likely they'll reach out to you. But I'd love to ask you a tough question, Kelah.
Sure.
So I'll put you on the spot. You mentioned desperation scale a couple times. And particularly right now, a lot of people are at their core being, they would probably admit, I need a job. Why? First of all, why is the desperation scale a thing? What are you looking for in job seekers that tell you they're desperate? And, how can they avoid looking desperate if that's a bad thing?
Yeah. So it's just something that will come off in the interview, right? And it's, we all have kind of that inner intuition, right? Where there's giving off the signals and the signs. I just need a job. I just need a job. Hire me because I just need a job. And it's not, I want to work for this organization. I want to further the goals of this organization. I want to be a team player, or I want to help you do whatever your KPI, key performance indicator is, and elevate, right? So it's just things that kind of show up. It's even the way in which candidates may respond to questions. It's lack of preparation, right? So the more research you do, the more you know about that company, or even really understanding the industry or what that role is and how you fit into that role, I think your desperation level kind of tapers off, if I can say that. And it comes off as genuine interest, right? And really like, oh, they're hyped to work with us, for us. They want to be a team player, and not just, oh, I just need a job. And again, there's other things that, depending on the experience level of an HR professional or a recruiter, talent acquisition specialist, that we just kind of know and see, So like between looking at the resume, how the person responds to questions, it will give us an indicator of, oh, this is just another job, and they'll probably be on the market again, and they'll leave us, right? Now, again, that's the person on the other side of the table making, innuendos about some things and filling in gaps. But that's kind of what I'd say, to that. So the desperation really just, I think a lot of it comes off from lack of being prepared, and really just having probably like these canned responses, right? There's no substance to the responses, right? And even probably them being able to articulate examples or certain things on their own resume and their own background. And even maybe, let's say the resume has just been from job to job to job, and there's not like this clear path or this thing that they're looking for per se. Hopefully that explains it a bit.
Right. And the desperation and the concern about desperation is really because it costs money to onboard people, and they just don't want someone to leap at the next opportunity when the economy looks a little bit better. And also noting that there are some people that will take jobs to pay the bills right now. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I can't,
No.
it's a healthy market.
It is business. It's business just on the candidate side of it, right? Because just like from an HR perspective, when furloughs, even pre-COVID, right? When furloughs, it's business. So I'm that HR professional that understands people having to take, right, a role or an opportunity because they need to pay the bills, they need to feed the kids, and take care of, their household. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you haven't experienced HR professional or recruiter on the other side of the table, they probably can read through it. So it's just a matter of being absolutely prepared, especially if you are applying for a job or a role that one may say you might be overqualified for, right? Like being ready and prepared to speak to why why you want the role, even if you present as if you're overqualified.
That's a good point, Kelah, because there are quite a few people out there that feel like if I submit for a job that I'm overqualified for, I'm guaranteed to get it because I'm overqualified. But in actuality, oftentimes that's not the case. And hiring managers won't even give you the time of day. So applying for jobs is a little bit of a stretch room is probably better than not. And if you're planning on applying for a job that you're overqualified for, I would encourage you to reconsider the entire content of your resume and your LinkedIn to align, because it's all about relevancy. Because to your point, I would love for you to articulate a little bit about why being overqualified is sometimes not the best for the roles you're applying for.
Sure. So from the employer perspective, you're a flight risk, right? So I know I'm and that hiring manager may want you because you're overqualified, because I can get all of these skills for this amount of money. And then I would go, is that really the organization you want to work for? Now, that's a decision. That's something you decide on your own. But you're a flight risk. There will come a time where you will either leave that role internally, right, or externally, because the truth of the matter is you're overqualified, right? The other piece to that, from the candidate side of it, it goes back to the top of our conversation where we talk about complacency, right? Being on autopilot, right? Our values and the mission of our values and our own personal mission, right? The things that get us charged up, or wake us up in the morning so we can just tackle our day, and that what the organization has. It will collide. And the thing that I didn't share of also, when kind of that signal that you become, when it's time to move on, you become physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted, right? I.e. workplace burnout, right? I.e., there's this other theme that's emerging right now around, corporate or company PTSD, right? How people have these triggers, right?
That's a real thing, people.
It absolutely is, and this coming from a veteran, who has been to Iraq and war. And I will say that I have probably more PTSD from corporate environment than that of being in Iraq and out there, right?
That's a strong statement.
It is a strong statement. Now, let me do this disclaimer, right? Every veteran is different, right? So, it is a strong statement. That's just Kelah's personal experience and personal story, right? So I think those are the things that I would say. One from the employer, which is you're a flight risk, and from the employee side, you'll end up kind of in this conversation where we're talking about, where you're ready to say it's really not the organization, it's really me and my values and the mission and the things that really charge me up. It's just not there anymore. I'm complacent, I'm on autopilot, and Kelah personally, that's just no way to just live day in, day out, because that also spills into your home life, right? We have people walking around with high level functioning anxiety in the workplace and at home, right, where we take it both, right? Because there's this,
which, by the way,
dotted line between
PTSD.
Say again?
It's an entry into PTSD. In fact, if you have a steady state anxiety, that's the first step into PTSD. And if you feel helpless or hopeless, that's when PTSD is actually etched into the limbic system, FYI. So just always remind yourself of what you can control and that you're not in a hopeless or helpless position. That's very important. From a neuroscientist, I will tell you, not that I'm a neuroscientist, but someone who studies neuroscience. I will tell you that's very important. So thank you for sharing that. And if anyone has any other questions, comments, anything at all you'd like for us to answer, touch on before we wrap up during this Career Coffee Chat show, please do pop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, thank you for joining. Make sure you check out the Career Coffee Chat podcast and be sure to share this. Sharing is caring. And I'm not just saying that to sound cliche. I actually mean it, because we are in a tough time right now. And it's very important that we share this and help other people see success in their job search and their career growth. So one of the things I'd love to wrap up on and a note is, if you are overqualified, for example, and you found that quote unquote overqualified, but you found that, what I really enjoyed, because I did some deep diving, I did all the things, right? I went through the values, and what I really loved with this aspect of a prior role, and I kind of left that and grew out of it, but I didn't really feel like that fit me and who I am. And but I really want to go back to this. I found a lot of joy in that space. Can you communicate that? And what should you do to realign your content? And is that appropriate?
Yes, it is absolutely appropriate, right? And I think everything that you just said is what you communicate, right? Like, let's say in the interview process, that's just what you say. Or you may not have to say that at all, right? Your resume, I always say that your resume is just that tool that gets you the interview. It gets you in the door, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have kind of, marked and gotten all these other skills and experiences, but this over here is what you really love, craft that resume to this over here and apply to jobs that relate to just that, right? Like your resume, we from an HR or a recruiting perspective, we're asking you questions or assessing you based on what you told us off that piece of paper. So you can shift what you're telling us, right? You don't have to speak to the entire pie. If you only like a quarter of the pie, right, or 3/4 of the pie, put that 3/4 on your resume and apply to roles that align to that 3/4. And I would probably say then there is no overqualification, right? Because also on your resume, what you would want to do is, like me, I have almost 20 years of HR experience, right? If I find that I really only love, let's say, training and development, right? I have probably more like 8 to 10 true training and development experience. So I'm not going to put 2 years, 20, or 18 years of HR professional. I'm going to put 8 years training and development experience, right? Mm-hmm. And so now I don't look as overqualified. Right?
Or what maybe about position titles, though? What about position titles? Because I think one of the big questions I get, and I'm sure everybody tuning in would love to know, is when you do the background check, let's just say that I had this role title, and as we all know, role titles do not necessarily align with what we actually did. And that's a big problem, because role titles are a big indicator, one of the biggest search features or search criteria. So let's just say I realigned my role titles to be more with what I want to do, because I did this work and I really want to do X, even though my role title was Y. I'm not lying, but it's not exactly what I was called. Mm-hmm. When the background check is done, what shows up and what doesn't, and what is allowed by law to ask and what is not? Because I think that will help job seekers tremendously to understand that.
So I will give you the answer that I think you're searching for here. So your resume is not a binding legal document. So you have poetic license there, right? Like what you're talking about. Now, when you actually complete the application, okay, you upload your resume into a system or you complete an application, put the title that you had at that company on the application. Because what you do in that application at the end, you say everything that I've given is true, right? And so if they could, right? I think it's minute, but just for you to be in the letter of the law, if you put the actual title that you had at that organization and maybe in parentheses put the one that matches your resume, right? you're in the letter of the law, because in that application, you're saying everything that I've given you, all the information that I've given you is true and exact. And when backgrounds, whoever backgrounds is, goes to conduct the background, and most organizations in this day and age will only verify like dates of employment, job title, very generic information, right? And you just want those things to match. And that's it.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you so much, because I know a lot of job seekers out there are seeking to pivot, and they're seeking to pivot off of a portion of what they've done in the past, which means they would like to adjust their job title. Let's just say I've been a geophysicist, for example, and a lot of what I did was data analysis. I really want to go for data analysis roles. And however, as a geophysicist, I was called a geophysicist, not a data analyst, right? But people are looking for data analyst, and I need to make sure that aligns. So let's see. Yeah, so like Eric said right here, he said, since many of us are in oil and gas, how can we rebrand ourselves as a new job position? So we just answered that question. Thank you for asking that, Eric. It's important that we don't lie, and it's also equally important that we align with the roles and be relevant with the roles and have that message prepared as to why you are focusing on X versus all of these things. Now, another part of his question was, without scaring the recruiters off that we're overqualified, I feel it may be caused in not being open to discuss salary or compensation demands. So a little bit of concern around salary and compensation, and then we'll wrap up our Career Coffee Chat show. How is it okay to say a range? And if so, what kind of range? $10,000, $5,000? What are we looking at here? Because we don't, a lot of people are like, I'm getting the question, I have to answer the salary question, but I don't want to scare people off, right? I want to be considered for the role, but what do I do? Can they go in low and renegotiate later? I don't know.
Okay, so I would say no, don't ever do that. That's just Kelah personal, like with my HR knowledge, I think first of all, I coach people, understand your minimum, right? You have, just like the employer, there's a salary band, right? There should be anyway, right? What's the minimum all the way to the high point, and we know the midpoint in HR, right? And an organization has a pay philosophy, and they can go, upwards, backwards, whatever they want to do. For you as a candidate, know your minimum. Know that number that you need yearly, monthly, whatever it is, and have a compelling reason if you go below that. Okay, but I probably would. I would encourage people not to go really, really low and think that they can ask for a raise and renegotiate later, especially like if you're in the oil and gas industry, because I know sometimes certain companies go years with no pay raise at all, depending on what the market is doing and what's happening. So I would say be firm in your values, your skills, your worth, understand your minimum. I encourage people to do research. You can do this yourself. Go to payscale.com. What's the other? Salary.com.
Salary.com.
And do searches, right? On organizations, right? So let's say just high level, because I know we're kind of running on time, but I want to give you guys some good insights here. So I would encourage, just generically speaking, have a salary range that you give to organizations that may have a few hundred employees, because their pay bands will be different than your Halliburton. Okay, so have a pay range that you give to companies that may have, 500 or so, depending on your industry and your profession, and have another one that may have like 2,000 to 3,000 employees, and have another pay band for those that are 20,000 and plus, because they all are different. The industry also matters too. I know I'm giving you guys a lot of work, but this is a way in which you don't have to second guess your worth, right? Or be afraid to put a number out there. Because if you do your research and you make sure that based on the size of the organization and the industry of the organization, you should be able to map your range to fit that. And so as you are applying, say, okay, well, here's my, and for the most part, it probably should overlap for you in some way, somehow. But just understanding if you're talking to a 50 million shop employer, their pay is going to be drastically different. And if they're in, I'm going to use manufacturing versus IT again, that's going to be different. If it's in IT, in theory, They might pay a little more depending on what they're doing and how sophisticated
Right.
they are.
If
But
they're
I
not
definitely,
sure.
I definitely would say, have your minimum and know your minimum. And as long as you can hold out for your minimum, do so. Because all the things we talked about throughout the day, be it burnout, anxiety, complacency, and how you feeling internally and how you kind of value your own self and your worth it will show up, especially if you are qualified, you bring great skills to the table, but you don't feel like you're being paid your worth. It's never going to be a good day at work.
That's right. Good point. So, Kelah, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, in the event description, we have a freebie from her. So I'd love for you to share with people a little bit about that and what that is and what you do. Are you working with mainly organizations? Are you working with individuals and organizations? How do you help people find their spark?
Absolutely. So right now I'm mainly working with individuals. And like earlier you spoke to it, I love to uncover hidden gems and help people emerge from the shadows. So the freebie that I have for everyone is 4 reasons you're not getting the promotion. As kind of I spoke to earlier, HR and your leadership's waiting on you. You're waiting on HR and your leadership. So I uncover 4 top reasons that internally in your organization you're not landing the promotion. If you have applied to roles and not gotten them, or even if you're just hiding what I call the shadows, you're a high performer, you deliver great work, everyone praises your work, but no one's tapping you on the shoulder to say, hey, you're really good, there should be more for you. Then I think this freebie is for you, to give you some practical tips and things that you can do to come out of the shadows. So I help powerhouse professionals stand out, get noticed, so that they can get promoted. I really niche down into internally in their organization, but of course, I also help people when they're ready to go external in the market as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. It's been a deep pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun having the questions and comments showing up. So if you are watching later, feel free to mention that you're watching the replay and that you have any questions at all. We will see it, we will be notified, and we will answer your questions. So again, this is Career Coffee Chat Live. My name is Erin Urban. This is Kelah Raymond, and we're very, very glad to have you on the show today and share with you some insider tips to make sure that you can grow your career in the right way. And be sure to check out the podcast. Again, Career Coffee Chat podcast is on all the available major channels and then some. I don't even know actually where it all is. It's everywhere. And YouTube. So there you go. So thank you, Jesse. Thank you for everybody tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Ta-ta.